Okay, it's good to see that there's at least mild interest in this topic this morning. And people are continuing to come in. Once we have filled all the seats, there is an overflow room next door where the superintendent's address will be broadcast. So thank you all for being here. I'm Paul Grogan, president of the Boston Foundation, and we are so pleased and honored, frankly, to be the venue for the superintendent to talk to us about his first 100 days. I see many familiar faces in the audience, so I don't think I have to go on and on about the foundation, but for those of you who may be here for the first time, of course, the Boston Foundation is Greater Boston's community foundation, a 100-year-old charity that stewards a significant amount of the philanthropic wealth available to this community, currently about $1 billion. The foundation and its donors make grants of over $100 million a year, mostly to Boston area nonprofits engaged in a wide variety of fields and activities. We are also pleased to host forums like this under the banner of Understanding Boston, and those forums are made possible by the Civic Leadership Fund and the Permanent Fund for Boston, and we thank those of you who have contributed to either or both funds. The Boston Foundation has very broad interests, as I said, but at the top of the list is education, and it's been that way for a very long time. In preparation for this today, I was reviewing the list of education-related organizations that got their first grant from the Boston Foundation and have gone on to become very, very important institutions. Organizations like Reach Out and Read, the Boston Compact, the Boston Plan for Excellence, EdVestors, the Boston Opportunity Agenda, Teach Plus, the Race to the Top Coalition, Bell and Citizen Schools doing the after-school work, the Up Education Network, You Aspire, Teach Plus, Success Boston. The list really goes on and on. We're very, very proud of having been there at the beginning for those organizations, but what they have subsequently gone on to do. And that rich tapestry of nonprofits interacting with the school system is one of the things I think gives us tremendous leverage. One of the reasons I wanted to take a minute and talk about our broader record in education is that we're keenly aware, because of the controversy surrounding it, that the Boston Foundation's support for expanding charter schools has led some to conclude that's all we care about. And nothing could be further from the truth. We recognize, as do you, that under any scenario, even further charter growth, the overwhelming majority of school children in Boston are going to be in the regular Boston schools, and it is critical that those schools perform at a high level and that we are all engaged in helping them improve, and we certainly are. The overwhelming majority of our financial resources going to education are being invested in district-related programs. We do believe, however, that there's growing interaction between the regular schools and the charters through the Boston Compact and other means, and you see also the migration of best practices and good ideas between the charters and the regular schools. So we do not see these as separate undertakings, but as rather dynamically linked, and it's one of the reasons we were so pleased at the appointment of Dr. Tommy Chang, because of his extensive background in both kinds of systems. I'm not going to do a full biography of the superintendent. He has more degrees than a thermometer. It would take a long time to go through them. I will mention that he is a proud product of Teach for America, which is such an important fountain of education reform talent in this country. And immediately before coming to Boston, he served as the local instructional superintendent, Intensive Support and Innovation Center at the Los Angeles Unified School District, where he oversaw 135 schools and approximately 95,000 students. And he also held a leadership post, as I mentioned, in a charter network, the Green Dot Public Schools. He began his tenure last July by embarking on a listening tour to hear the concerns and hopes of students, parents, and leaders from across the city. And that initial listening tour informed the creation of his 100-day plan, which we will hear about in a moment. I will say that just from my personal experience, one of the astonishing things about the superintendent has been his accessibility and his thoughtful listening and the commitment he has made to learn this city, which has been just profound. And I think we all ought to be grateful for his effort. And I, like everyone in the room, is really looking forward to hearing his remarks. Please welcome Superintendent Tommy Chang.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Paul, for the intro. I want to recognize, I believe there are 2 school committee members here, Jerry Robinson, I believe I saw her, and of course our chairman, Michael O'Neill. Thank you both for coming today. So I thought the school committee meeting was at 6 p.m. today. Quite the crowd, and it's being streamed as well. So what I will be doing today is going over what I have learned in the first 100 days. The first 100 days technically started in September of 2015, so it kind of ran the course of the first semester of the school year. What I hope to do today is to give a quick overview of the 8 key projects that we completed in the first 100 days, and then do a deep dive on some of them, not all of them, but some of them, depending on what the audience thinks I should be really delving into. So I'm going to ask you to participate at certain points of the presentation. So if we may go to the next slide. Oh, it's right. Is it right here? I think. Okay, perfect. Awesome. So the first 100 days, the work that we did, we actually created a website for it. You can access it on the BPS website. But what we did basically was spend about 4 months focusing on 8 key projects. And the reason we chose these 8 key projects came out of just some intense listening, as what Paul was saying, during the transition process. During the transition process, I shook hands with about 1,300 people. We did 40 different listen and learn events, and we just captured tons of information. And based on the information we captured, we said, let's hit on these 8 key projects. And these 8 key projects should be grounded in the work that has already been done by the school committee, some strategic planning, some of the mayor's key priorities, mostly grounded in some key values. I want to go through each one of these key values because I think these key values will thread through my leadership here in Boston Public Schools. So the first key value is all youth can and must achieve at high levels. It's our equity statement. It grounds everything we do. In this value is 2 key projects, one around AWC and one around MassCore. And those 2, I'm going to go back and forth, okay? So it's expand AWC and take a deep look at MassCore. And what AWC is, for those that may not know, these are courses and seats in the city of Boston for some kids, not all kids. 4th through 6th graders qualify for an AWC, Advanced Work Class seat, based on a multiple choice exam that they take in 3rd grade. And based on how well they do on that multiple choice exam, they either get an invitation to AWC or they go into general ed. As a former colleague and mentor of mine often says, it's orange juice for some, orange drink for others phenomenon. I heard some woos, but that's what's happening. We have 10% of 8th graders, 4th through 6th graders that get a more rigorous curriculum and get access to more enrichment, and the rest of the students get a quote-unquote general education. In terms of MassCore is this set of courses that is recommended by Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that they recommend for high school students to be successful in college. And what we know, based on the data we found, is that some schools do a really good job of offering and graduating students with a MassCore, and other schools do not. And it's cut really along racial and socioeconomic lines. So So those are kind of the two first projects. The second value, we must innovate and transform teaching and learning in order to inspire excellence. So the two projects around that were around the high school redesign, specifically at Madison Park as our prototype, but high school redesign work in general. And this was an initiative that was started by the mayor, really headed by the Chief of Education, Ron Dorsey, and we are now in close collaboration. Madison Park is in the middle of writing its innovation plan. We're doing some deep work there in partnership with an organization called Continuum. They're a design organization, really rethinking what a high school education should look like. Where should learning take place? Should it only take place in the setting of a classroom, or should it be taking place all around Boston? Should we be deeply personalizing the education, and how do we go about doing that? And how do we make sure that career technical education is an opportunity for all students? Because preparing kids for college, career, and life means not only knowing the academic matters, but really understanding what they're learning in school, how it's relevant to their real lives. Extended learning time was also an initiative that was started before I came in. It is about expanding learning opportunities for K-8 students and guaranteeing 40 extra minutes for all those students by next year. Third value. That print is way too small for me to see. Oh. Those closest to students must be empowered and be held accountable for the most important decisions that lead to student achievement. So I chose not to use the word autonomy here. I don't know if people notice that, but the reason why I'm going to choose to use the word empowerment is I believe schools need to be given tools, and we need to take the responsibility as central office to build capacity at schools and make important decisions. We can't just say, go ahead and make any decision you want. That's not fair to schools. That doesn't empower schools, and does not set schools up to be successful. It is about empowerment, and it's about holding them accountable. What we hope to do is create a central office that's really designed about providing service to schools, having schools then make the decision, but we're bounded. I mean, we are still one school district. A lack of coherence and a lack of guardrails in a school system like ours actually doesn't serve all kids. I'm going to give one crystal clear example of this. Every single high school in BPS has a ability to choose their own graduation requirements. So your diploma from one school may mean something very different from a diploma from another school. I think we need to take a critical look at that. When we analyze the data behind that, we saw just wide disparity. So that's why we chose to use the word empowerment versus autonomy. And the work that we've been doing there really focuses on how we reorganize the central office this summer. We did some shifting already with our central office to make sure that there was more focus on instruction. Those who supervise principals are focused on academics and teaching and learning. Everybody else is meant to support that work. Every child should have the opportunity to attend a high-quality school close to home. So, let me go. That's the fourth value. Couple of projects under that value. One on long-term financial planning. Instead of planning year in, year out, and doing one-year planning cycles, our goal in the first 100 days was create a mechanism to start planning long-term. We're in the middle of a strategic implementation planning, which will lead and result in a 3 to 5 year long-term strategic implementation plan. There needs to be a budget that accompanies that. So we need to be able to do this work. So the long-term financial planning team is led by Eric Gianpietro, Special Assistant to the Superintendent, formerly the CFO, who is working alongside Eleanor Lorenz, who is our Executive Director of School Finance, to create a long-term financial plan for BPS. Also, BPS performance meter. Currently, we don't have a set of key performance indicators that we use, that I use, in order to measure the health of the system. We have a prototype now. In the first 100 days, we've completed a prototype. We have shared that prototype to the school committee, and it's accessible online. But we feel like we have to be able to monitor how well the organization is doing at any time, and Performance Meter will help us do that. So those two projects were part of the fourth value. And the last value is one guided by this idea of a culture of we. We will only be successful when we work together. And part of that work means how well we communicate two ways, from central office out to schools, two ways from central office to community, two ways from central office to various stakeholders. So we're trying to build up our internal communication mechanisms. We've redone a superintendent's bulletin. I've engaged in various town halls over the first 100 days, and we're going to continue doing that work. So, quick overview of the key 8 projects. What I wanted to do is actually do a poll everywhere. That is, can we take off the presentation and go to the website, the Poll Everywhere website, really quickly? Yep. Raise your hand if you've done Poll Everywhere before. Great. If we can expand that, that is great. Okay, so I did the cheap version, so only the first 40 people can vote. But it's quite simple. You take out your cell phones, text Tommy Chang 888, text to Tommy Chang 888. Oh, sorry. Text Tommy Chang 888 to 37607, 37607. That will allow you to join. Then what I would like you to do is, what topic would you be interested in hearing more about? And it goes, it doesn't label it. Can we click, no, it's actually active. When poll is, actually click that. See, I think you could. Can we click that? Nope. Poll is not active, so we gotta click this, where it says, we'll try this for 30 more seconds. If it does not work, we're gonna go old school and just raise hands. Okay. So this is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I believe. I believe that's how it works. If somebody could text to one of those letters and see if it works. Poll is not active. Okay, we'll go old school. Who is interested in, I'm going to go deeply in a couple of these topics. Who's interested in hearing more about AWC? Okay, let's see. Okay, who is interested in hearing more about Mass Core? And one vote each, just one vote each. B. Okay, who is interested in high school redesign in Madison Park? Ooh, there seems to be good interest in that. Okay, how about extended learning time? Okay, how about central office redesign? Okay, long-term financial planning. Okay, performance meter. Oh God, it's kind of even. There's like internal communications. Okay. All right, we're going to do AWC, and then we're going to do a little high school redesign. Maybe, Ron, you can help me a bit on the high school redesign as needed, and we'll do long-term financial planning if we have time. So let's do AWC. Can we go back to the presentation? I apologize about that poll. I was really hoping to like show off with that poll. Doesn't always work. Okay, let's give this thing a shot. Can we advance to the next slide? No? Is it? Okay. So, as that's coming up, I'll delve into a little deeper into AWC. So, advanced work class, as I said, are a set of courses that are available to 4th and 6th graders throughout the city of Boston. You will find them in only some schools in Boston. You won't find them in all schools in Boston. And in schools where you have AWC, some classrooms are AWC classrooms from 4th through 6th grade, and other classrooms are not. So what the phenomenon you see is as you walk into schools with AWC, you will see that you walk into one 4th grade class and it looks, there's a certain type of curriculum, certain type of demographic of students, and then you walk across the hallway to another 4th grade classroom and it looks very different. And is cut very along racial and socioeconomic lines. So there was a study that was commissioned to take a deep look at this. And it was Annenberg and CCE were the leads in this. And it was around Black and Latino boys and the opportunity and achievement gap. And what we see, so what we see in terms of demographics is white students are 13% of BPS, but 27% of AWC enrollment. Hispanic or Latino students are 39% of BPS, but only 22% of AWC enrollment. Black students are 37% of BPS enrollment, 22% of AWC enrollment. And if you take a look at other subgroups such as EL, special education students, you see pretty much the same thing. We spent the first 100 days trying to understand this phenomenon. I think it's crystal clear how I feel about this issue, but I needed to understand why, because it is a viable option for many families. And many families, at least they will articulate to me and others that they choose Boston Public Schools because of AWC. So we wanted to learn more. So we did. And the blue represents some of the positive remarks that we received about AWC. And as I said, it is a viable option. Students who are in AWC feel like they're part of a really intimate community. They feel that they're getting the enrichment they need. And students are in generally pretty happy with these courses, except for the fact, especially with 4th graders, they feel that they are separated by their peer group from 3rd grade. I heard that a lot. So the question was, what should we do about this? Like we don't want parents leaving at 4th grade because they feel like they don't have an option. And we don't want parents leaving and students leaving because they feel like if we have a more inclusive environment, it may do away with the rigor that their children get. I mean, these are all very real conversations that happen. So we're proposing a couple of things. For schools that have AWC, 4th through 6th grade, where there are some AWC classes and some non-AWC classes, we've proposed this idea of integrating AWC for all. We want schools to make sure that they have the capacity and they have the buy-in in order to actualize this. And if they decide to do this, what we are willing to commit for this upcoming year is intense professional development for all 4th grade teachers, professional development around universal design of learning, around the Common Core, around behavioral management. And then we will launch next year a 4th grade cohort at those schools that's AWC for all. Okay? That's one proposal. For schools where they don't currently have any AWC classes, but they want to do something very similar, we're going to do something called Excellence for All. And basically, it's pretty much the same thing, where we're going to provide the same sort of training, we're going to provide additional resources for enrichment, and any 4th grade student that attends that school will be in one of these Excellence for All classes. The goal is, with that, especially for all our schools, they don't want their 3rd graders having to choose another option and leaving for an AWC seat somewhere. We want them to be able to stay at their school and be guaranteed a curriculum and be guaranteed enrichment that is very similar. So Our goal is, hopefully, we will see a lot less movement between 3rd and 4th grade as we move into next year. Now, there are some schools that may not be ready for any of this. If not, so be it. But what we're going to do is closely monitor the situation, because hopefully sooner than later, this will not be an issue. And students can read in a history book about how in 2016, the beginning of AWC, there was the beginning of the end to the AWC. I have 2 more minutes left. I'm going to jump into the other one was around high school redesign. So let me take a moment to read the charge of high school redesign. Develop a 3-year plan for Madison Park that serves as a launch site for initial high school redesign strategies. The plan will better align its academic and vocational education programs so that students receive the academic and real-world foundations they need to prepare them for college career and responsible civic participation. This will include everything from expanding and deepening partnerships with community colleges, universities, and local businesses. A lot of this work was led specifically by Ron prior to our arrival, but we've done some deep listening to understand from stakeholders, not only at Madison, but Ron, how many folks across the city of Boston? 2,000 plus people have weighed in on what high school should look, how they should look. And there were 4 redesign principles have emerged. And we're going to do some more listening to kind of make sure these are the 4 right ones, because these 4 design principles will then be used at any school that is ready. And they are about educating a whole person, a rigorous instruction, dynamic, personalized learning that doesn't have to occur just in the classroom, and expansive, which is making sure that connections are being made beyond the academics of their high school. What's really neat is that we've created a website. Continuum has created a website, and you take a look at this. It's called High School Redesign Boston, and it talks about the future. And what I wanted to do is kind of guide you through the website, but we don't have time. But take a look at the website, because it'll have the design principles. It will have all the feedback that parents and students gave at Madison Park, everything in one place. What we also did at Madison was currently Madison has 19 different career pathways. We did a deep analysis of each one of those 19 pathways to determine, is there a viable career in this pathway? Can they get a job immediately out of high school? And what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of consolidation of pathways at Madison. That will give us more opportunity to bring in new pathways, maybe a biotech pathway, new pathways, and really design in high school that is truly about giving kids access to a living wage job coming out of high school. That's super important. It is not just any job, it's actually a living wage job. And what a great opportunity to do that here in the city of Boston, where we are rich in resources in terms of higher education and rich in resources in some of the most innovative career pathways in the world. So what I will do is I'm going to stop there. I'll make the deck available to everyone, and you could take a look at any of the other projects. But let me close by just saying this. These projects that we have completed are meant also to be very symbolic. They will point to our values and point to the work that we want to do in the city together. And I'm going to call on everybody in this room to be an active participant. This work cannot be done alone. As you take a look at the rest of these projects, if there are any ways for you to be connected in work, for us to actually enhance the work by making sure it's cohesive, please reach out personally to me or Dr. Makiba McClure, whom I know many of you know, who sits who's right up front, who is my chief of staff. So. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and we'll be doing a Q&A soon, so thanks.
Well, thank you, Tommy, for that interesting and provocative presentation. I think that was a first for audience participation, so it won't be the last time for sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Pauly. I'm a Senior Director for Education here at the Boston Foundation, and I'm delighted to see so many good friends here at the forum. We do plan to leave a lot of time for questions, and we'll bring Tommy back. We'll add a chair to the stage, so there'll be lots of engagement with Tommy as we go through our morning. But first, we have an all-star panel who actually agreed to be on the panel before they knew that would be the best way to have a reserved seat. So I'd like to invite them to join me on the stage as I read you their biographies. You have a little bit about them on your seats, but you should feel free to come on up. So immediately to my right is John Conley, the Executive Director of 1647, which is a nonprofit organization focused on strengthening the connection between families and school. Prior to co-founding 1647, John served as a Boston City Councilor at large from 2008 to 2014. And as City Councilor, John spent 4 years as chair of the Committee on Education, where he oversaw many things, including the annual review of the Boston Public Schools budget. John lives in West Roxbury, and he and his wife have 3 children, 2 of whom attend the Boston Public Schools, the Trotter School in Roxbury, Massachusetts. So welcome, John. Next to him is Ron Dorsey, who is our Chief of Education for the City of Boston. Ron is a member of Mayor Martin J. Walsh's cabinet. As Chief of Education, he is charged with setting a strategic agenda for the entire city that will improve the quality of instruction and student support across the education pipeline and better integrate schools, community, and work-based learning. Before joining the cabinet and taking on that very small task, he served as the evaluation director and education program officer at the Barr Foundation, where among the many things he did, he managed the foundation's giving in out-of-school time and summer learning. Next to Ron is Audrey Jackson, who is a teacher at the Manning School and the 2016 Massachusetts Teacher of the Year. That's where, yeah. Audrey teaches 5th grade at the Manning, which is a level 1 full inclusion Boston Public School that specializes in serving students affected by trauma. Audrey engages in many leadership and advocacy opportunities, including as a founding member of the Boston Foundation's Teacher Advisory Board, and she has also served on the State Teacher Advisory Cabinet. She is a graduate of Williams College and entered teaching through the Boston Teacher Residency Program. In addition to being Massachusetts Teacher of the Year, she's also recently been named to the Negotiated Rulemaking Committee to advise the U.S. Department of Education on the new ESSA Act. So welcome, Audrey. Next to Audrey is Liliana Mickle, who is Special Assistant to the Vice Provost, Academic Support Services and Undergraduate Studies at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and may have the longest title on the stage. She joined UMass as a Special Assistant to the Vice Provost in September of 2010. In this role, she oversees all operating aspects of the Success Boston College Completion Initiative, which focuses on increasing the persistence and success rates for graduates of the Boston Public Schools. She also works with Cambridge Rinsen Latin School, Chelsea High School, and transfer students from Roxbury Community College. Prior to this role, she was the Director of Admissions, undergraduate admissions at UMass Boston. And finally, rounding out our all-star panel, we have Belisa Moriarty, who is a parent at the Boston Public Schools. Belisa is a proud resident of Mattapan and an alumna of UMass Boston, so we have you seated in the right seat next to Liliana. Belisa has 4 children, 3 sons who attend the Boston Public Schools and a 3-year-old daughter who attends a Boston Public Schools playgroup. Her sons have attended 8 different BPS schools, and her middle son has an individualized education plan. And Belisa noted that by being here, she hopes to encourage other parents to engage in the conversation. So welcome all. As you can see, we have a diverse set of perspectives, and so we're going to jump right in to get their take on what we just heard and what you've seen both in this last 100 days and prior to that from the Boston Public Schools. Liliana, I'd like to start with you. I'd like to start with the end in mind. So when we think about where BPS students are going, we want them to graduate college and career ready. But Superintendent Chang, in his talk about AWC, noted significant disparities in advanced work class and mass core completion. As a representative of higher education, what are you seeing about this? What advice would you have for the district to promote college and career readiness for all students?
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to do is commend Dr. Chang and his team for beginning the listening conversation and really having a conversation about AWC and Mass Core and ensuring that all of our children have the access that they need. The real things that I saw in the AWC work that he mentioned was the challenge, organizational and study skills, and stamina. These are all things that students need to succeed in college. And to have a system that has the disparity that currently exists within the AWC and the Mass Core certainly creates a situation where students are not always entering college with the skills that they need to be prepared to take challenging courses like math, going into the science programs, going into nursing. There are a lot of work that needs to be done to ensure that all Boston Public Schools students have that culture of all youth can and must achieve at high levels. And certainly the work has been begun by the task force that was put together on the Opportunity and Achievement Gap task force that was put together by the Boston Public Schools Committee. But the conversation has begun, and we have started to take a look at that and really looking to see how we can narrow that gap that currently exists between those students who are in AWC and those students who are not in AWC. How do we make sure that this district, which I'm a product of, I graduated from Boston Public Schools and also graduated from UMass Boston and went to the Trotter. As one of the first schools I entered. So it's really nice to see that we're beginning the work. We're looking at all of our students. We're looking at it from a perspective of achievement and opportunity. And right now, as it's structured, that opportunity is not available to all of our students. And as a higher education institution, we really need to think about the preparation that's happening in the classroom because it impacts the opportunities that students have way beyond the walls of the district. And certainly at the higher education level, it prevents some students to going into programs that they have aspired to be in for years, but not have the necessary preparation to be successful.
Thank you, and I'll come back to you for any specific recommendations in a minute. But I'd like to go on to the second core value that Dr. Chang highlighted, which is a focus on instruction. And Audrey, I'll turn to you. Superintendent Chang talked about how he is rethinking the district through high school, he and his team are rethinking the district through high school redesign, through central office redesign. Across each of the projects, there was a focus on instruction. So how does this feel to you as a teacher? What changes have you noticed?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the panel as a teacher to talk about this really important education topic, or all of the topics involved. As a teacher, the one thing I'd say, this value, I believe, actually relates to the first in many ways. And I think that Dr. Chang has talked about the people closest to what's happening in the classroom need to be involved and held accountable. And there were a couple examples where I think that could potentially be increased as we go forward. So with Continuum as an advisor about high school redesign and preparing professional development and looking into expanding rigor for all in classrooms, that teachers, educators really need to be involved in this process. They are the ones closest to the children. They are the ones who should be involved in the creating of the model and what happens instead of having it being created and then they react to it. We all know that this is a time where we are questioning the resources available and how we're going to move forward. And I think that the majority of educators in our city, in our district, are an untapped resource in terms of what they can offer to moving our district forward and how they can collaborate with partners to inform that we are not just recycling some old ideas or putting a stamp on something, but we're responding to the diverse needs of students in a way that's really productive and actionable, but also sustainable. Can I touch on one other thing? Mm-hmm. So I also just wanted to speak to the idea of advanced work and that just to portray a little reality check for you. I know Dr. Chang mentioned it's a multiple choice test in third grade. AWC, the current criteria for selection is one time standardized test given during the first month of school for children who are 8 years old. So I want you to think about the inherent privilege or disadvantage, you might say, either flip side of the coin, for students who have had enriching summers, students who have had excellent programming across the city, students who have either assistance with transportation or community resources, so that even if their family can't drive them to a camp, they know people in their community or their school who can, that when it's the first month of school and you are taking a time standardized test, and you know that this test at age 8 could influence your whole trajectory and your narrative of what you can accomplish in education, that's a humongous pressure to put on little shoulders, quite literally. And I just want to name that I greatly appreciate Dr. Chang's open and honest discussion about some of the trends and disparities in our district, because I wholeheartedly believe that there is no person or set of people who is trying to manufacture and create these disparities, but they exist, and it's our job to not let them persist. One of my very first students was in my class at the Murphy during one of my first years of teaching. And at the Murphy, there are 8 advanced work classes, and I was not teaching an advanced work class. And I recall many specialists would come into the room and say, "Oh, Ms. Herzig," which was before I was married, you know, "are you sure they didn't give you an advanced work class by mistake?" In front of the children. And one of those students, likely more, but one of them went on to attend Boston Latin School and was actually a member, not a founding member, but involved with the Black at BLS campaign, and expressed her gratitude for the issues being brought to light, and also noted, I've been messaging with her recently, how she has felt sort of, you know, that she's going against the grain, coming from a non-advanced work class and working her way up persistently until she got access to that school. And I think that narrative for some kids to believe that there's a path for some but not for all is something that we as adults have an obligation to make sure that it's not just saying, you know, we're going to just change everything so no one has an opportunity, but to look at the systemic practices that are denying some an equitable access to that opportunity.
Thank you. Belisa, I'd like to go to you next. The superintendent talked about building the culture of we. If we're going to make these changes that the superintendent talked about, it will depend on students, parents, teachers, principals, all working together. How do you hear the culture of we, and what has your experience been in the BPS?
When I think about we, I think about 3 areas that specifically affect me. And the first area would be my we with the central office, which has been really good this year. There's a lot of communication, transparency. You're very visible, so I like that. I met you before I shook hands with you. So that's been really good. My we with the school is also another we, with the principals. When I mean the school as the functioning, the supporting staff, the secretaries. So with the principal and the staff that will greet you. And I always look at that we as, do I feel welcome in the school? Are my needs being heard? Is the principal supporting everyone and listening to everyone? And I'm telling you that I would not be able to sit right here if it wasn't for a principal who actually is a superintendent now, one of the superintendents, who gave me the voice to speak, who asked me to be on his board. So, I mean, I'm really appreciative of that. And I also realize that some years that we in schools changes with transition. You're in the same school, the next year you get another principal, and the feeling is totally different. You don't feel that we. They don't want you to walk your child to class. So that's really something that it's not scientific, but it's just the way I feel. I feel that I'm not as welcome as I used to be. And of course I take into account the transition or whatever's going on, that there are topics and things that are going on that may be of greater importance. But my closest we is my we with my teachers. I have a son with an IEP, and that is crucial, that communication. I have 2 sons in high school, and the oldest, I switched him out of a high school because I felt that communication wasn't there. I need to guide my children, and I know that there's differences that they're older now, that they may not need you as much, but I don't believe that. They need me. So, and they really look to me. It's incredible. But they do look to me every night for guidance and help. And years past, especially with a son with an IEP, that we hasn't been there. The communication has been a little bit lacking, or sometimes a lot lacking, where I'm really blindsided at an IEP meeting, where, you know, I've asked for all this, and then you hear the news, and then there are tears at an IEP meeting, which is very difficult. But at this point, I'm having a wonderful year with communication with my teachers. My sons go to Fenway High. The staff there, very young, but very, very adept at communication. Whatever they need, they email me, they call me. We have our parent conferences, and it's just incredible to see this young staff so confident in their dealings with parents. And that's what you want to see, because you know, we are the equal partner. And I've met the gold standard in communication. They have this one teacher that I have never encountered that level of communication, which has just made a difference. He's their humanities teacher, and at the beginning of the year, he sent out a survey. He draws from that survey. He emails you. He tells you if your child contributed wonderfully to a conversation in class. The best thing is that he invited us to read a book with our kids, which is like, that's something that I've always asked for. What are they reading so that I can connect with my children at home? And so right now we're reading Between the World and Me with both my children, which has been a wonderful experience.
Thank you. Thank you very much. John, you're also a parent. What have you heard today that as a parent is important to you? I wanted to particularly ask you about something that we didn't talk about, which is extended learning. And how does that connect the pieces of communication with parents, teaching, and more time for learning?
Yep. Well, I think for me, what resonates so strongly with Superintendent Chang is the culture of we. And I think a lot of folks would think that's a throw-in line, that's a thing that you say that sounds very collegial, but when you meet Tommy Chang, you know this is in his heart, and this is the core of what he is all about, that we need to be a more inclusive system where it's not just about my 2 children in BPS, it's about my responsibility for all the children in BPS, and Belize's responsibility for all the children in BPS. And that means so much to me in terms of the advanced work when I hear that today. My oldest is a 2nd grader, loves the Trotter. We've had an amazing experience there. And yet my wife and I sometimes find that the only conversation in our marriage is about the advanced work test next year and what that means. Because to us, we do that and we make sure that she's getting the academics that you sort of know are insured in advanced work, but that would require us to pull her out of a school that she absolutely loves. And if we make the commitment to keep her there, how do you explain to her when many of her peers leave because of the advanced work test? And the other piece that I always saw in advanced work was that you can look at it from the standpoint of my child and the kid who takes those tests, gets into advanced work and moves on. It's not lost on the kids who stay behind what happened. They know exactly what happened, and it's devastating for those children. And then we perpetuate it again when we take the exam tests at 6th grade. And so to me, the fact that Tommy Chang is willing to take this on makes me a huge supporter and fan. By the same token, when I think about extended learning time, we can see something that right now doesn't work because the fiscal state of BPS doesn't work. And that's really where the culture we is the most important. And I could talk to you about the importance of extended learning time. I think everybody understands that. And we still have one of the shortest school days in urban America for the vast majority of our kids in BPS. But what we really need to confront is the fiscal health of this system. The McKinsey report says that we've got building capacity for 93,000 students, yet we have 53,000 in the schools. And let me be crystal clear on that. We don't have student capacity for 93,000. That's how when you count rooms and you count square footage and you look at the 22-to-1 student class ratio. But once you take into account SPED and ELL, it's fewer than 93,000. But I think it's safe to say when your gap between building capacity and actual students is 40,000, that we have tens of thousands of empty seats that cost this district an unbelievable amount of dollars every year. We have over 120 buildings, over 120 schools. And part of the shift to culture of we is recognizing the culture of me that has dominated in BPS for years. Because it's been intentional within BPS management to spread the students out across those 120 buildings, to make it seem like the problem isn't as severe as it is, and then in the process have understaffed schools with half-filled classrooms and tens of millions of dollars that just evaporate every year. And so if we don't get real about the fact that we need to address that and get this aligned properly, nothing else can happen. You can't expand inclusion if you're not on a firm financial footing. You really can't reform advanced work if you're not on a firm financial footing. You can't create the high schools that you want to create if you're not on a firm financial footing. And so we're going to have to make really difficult decisions around how to align these schools properly and address the empty seats. And that's where the culture of we is going to be most important. Are we really focused on giving our children what's best, or are we going to continue to try and spread them across the system so that really we're doing what's best for adults? And I think that's the tough thing, and that's where it's incumbent on us to support Tommy Chang and to support the mayor in making this. And I just say that very crystal clear. Mayor Walsh and Superintendent Chang didn't create this issue. They've inherited it, and we've got to help them address it if we really want to give our children the absolute best.
Thank you, and I'll come back to you for any specific recommendations on that in a moment. But first, Ron, we've talked about the culture of we. We've talked about the inequity that we see currently in some pathways around AWC. And yet we know that a core value of the Boston Public Schools is quality close to home and equity. All children can and must achieve at high levels. So how do you put those together from where you sit, thinking about all of the city's children?
Sure. I'll say a couple of things. First of all, I want to make sure that it's well understood in this room that the 100-day plan is actually a collaborative agenda. So when you talk about having talked to 1,500 stakeholders across the city, a 35-person transition team, this is not just Tommy Chang saying, this is what I think is important. This is a broad stakeholder group setting priorities for the city that we are listening to and that we are following. His leadership has been refreshingly inclusive, and I think the 100-day plan is illustrative of that. The 100-day plan and the strategies that are emerging from it, if you can allow me to divert a little bit, are really at the core of a larger change agenda for education in Boston. And so if we think about this big picture, first of all, we've got to make sure that there is pipeline quality and sustainability from early care all the way through post-secondary, and a seamlessness there that really lowers the opportunity costs for students to access instruction and support that they need. Secondly, our work is about confronting the equity challenges and addressing systemic bias all the way through the pipeline. Again, early care through post-secondary. The superintendent showed you some places where racial bias and gender bias live in our systems. It's quite evident. There is a justice imperative to make sure that we address those things. We have the tools, we have the knowledge. I think we have to make sure that we have the courage to do those things as well. Lastly, we want to make sure that there is full access to the city's learning assets. Schools are our foundation in Boston, and we're doing a bang-up job in a lot of ways. There's improvement to be done. But if you think about Boston as being probably the mecca for youth-serving nonprofits in America, there may be 4 cities that you can think of, but if Chicago, San Francisco, and New York were in the room, I would tell them Boston has you beat every day of the week, all day, every day. We also have incredible civic institutions. We also have incredible universities and colleges. All of these resources need to be made accessible to our students and families so that Boston is a place where learning happens anytime, anywhere, and with a great deal of equity. And so when I think about, Elizabeth, putting these things together, Superintendent and his team are driving the systems agenda, the work that BPS does at the core. A lot of my work is about the ecosystem work. What are the other pieces that fit in there? So if we think about two examples really quickly, and I'll just do early learning. The mayor is committed to making sure that every 4-year-old in Boston is in a high-quality pre-K seat by 2020. And so we're talking about 6,300 young people or children a year, making sure that either in a school-based classroom or in a community setting, they are in a high-quality seat. We can do that. We're building on BPS's lauded K-1 program, probably the preeminent K-1 program in America right now in terms of closing early achievement gaps. So we want to create a mixed delivery system where if parents choose to be in a BPS classroom or a community setting, they are getting the same level of quality regardless of the door that they enter. But we want to complement that in some ways and make sure that community has the ability to lead learning from the earliest ages. So the city has been a partner in a new initiative called the Boston Basics campaign. And this is really a partnership between the Black Philanthropy Fund, which is a donor-advised fund of TBF, the Harvard Achievement Gap Institute, WGBH, and BMC Pediatrics. There are 5 basic research-based practices that everyone in this room can do with a child 0 to 3. We want to make sure that every adult in the city knows what those 5 practices are. You can go to bostonbasics.org and learn about them. You probably do them. We want you doing them in combination and doing them relentlessly. When learning begins at home and in the community, we will better assure kindergarten readiness and make sure that we see less fade out in the early grades, but that we also build the community capacity to support learning throughout a young person's school career.
Great, thank you. Can you say more about the ecosystem in Boston? I know Boston Public Schools has partnered closely through the Boston Compact with Catholic schools and charter schools alike. How is that shaping the conversation or informing the plan moving forward?
Sure. The Boston Compact is an evolving partnership, and I think a very productive partnership between those school entities. When you think about the work that has to be done, part of what we have to realize is that urban education in Boston is defined by many school types that are authorized by different authorizing bodies from government or institutions, be it the Catholic Church. What we need to figure out is how to bring some coherence to the school environment and to make sure that we are all partners in taking on some of the most pernicious challenges in education. There are some challenges that cut across education that it doesn't matter what kind of school we're talking about, district, charter, or Catholic. When we're talking about chronic absenteeism, the ability to support English language and special education learners, when we are talking about discipline and restorative justice practices, or getting to a point where we are seriously implementing social emotional learning, that is not the domain of any one type of school. And in case you don't know it yet, no school has cornered the market on quality or equity. No school type has cornered the market. So there is a lot of work that we all have to do. Our belief in the compact is that we're better together in tackling some of these things. And so I'm proud that, very early on we are seeing a lot of exchange around teacher hiring and making sure that we are hiring a diverse workforce across all schools. We're looking at issues of induction and teacher preparation and professional development across schools as well. But I think we've also got to get to the point where we're having an exchange about a topic that comes up all the time, school discipline. BPS is doing a great job in helping us define a high bar for that. There are charter schools doing a great job, but we need to get in the room with one another and discuss what the high standard is that we're going to hold each other accountable to that preserves learning time for students. We want to make sure that we maximize the time that every student is receiving instruction and is in front of a high quality teacher. A lot of that has to do with how discipline is implemented. There are a lot of challenges, far more challenges for us to tackle together in collaboration than there are fights to have across schools. And at the end of the day, for the Walsh administration, it's about 77,000 young people learning and paying attention to the unique needs of the 57 in BPS, of the 9 in charter schools, of the 8 in Catholic schools, but it's got to add up to the right results for every student.
Great, thank you. Superintendent Chang talked about a performance meter and how he'll indicators that he'll consider when thinking about the health of the district and presumably how they're supporting these students who will grow up to be people successful in college and career. So I'm going to ask a question about performance meter, and I'm going to ask it of each of you. What would you like to see as parents, as teachers? But Liliana, I'm going to pick on you first again. We know Boston every year is sending more and more students on to college.
Yes.
More students are graduating with a post-secondary plan in place. What changes would you like to see, either through high school redesign or some of the other work underway, that would tell you, as either an indicator or just an anecdote, how that these students are more ready to succeed?
I think that a lot of it is around some of the understanding the placement exams with regards to college placement exams, seeing some kind of work that gets our students ready to take the college entrance exams, not SATs, but how do you get into a math course? The importance of that student knowing that there is going to be an entrance exam in college, that they need to take it seriously and understand the importance of that exam, that that exam will determine where they go and where they don't go. So having the district think about how they connect those items that are appearing at the college level through this metrics will be important too. I think is one of the key areas. Thinking about how we're doing around the equity, looking at the indicators from racial and backgrounds and continuing to do that to ensure that the district is actually closing the achievement gap, providing the opportunities for all the students that they have within the district.
Great, thank you. And for Belisa or John, as parents, what would you want to see on a performance meter, either in an indicator or in the experiences that you'd like your children to have as they work their way through BPS?
I want to see family engagement metrics on that kind of meter. Personally, as a parent, there's a lot of things we want to get direct from school, but when we're looking for what central office is looking at, I want them to monitor the level of family engagement in each school. We have amazing family engagement minds here in Boston, and Michelle Brooks and Karen Mapp and folks like that. By the same token, we have a very centralized family engagement effort in Boston, and we need to think about family engagement. And parents don't want to be connected to the central office. They want to be connected to the school their child goes to. So how are we measuring things like teachers doing the things Belisa talked about, emailing home, texting home, doing a home visit, whatever it may be, but how are we encouraging our schools to have very individualized communication with families? That's what matters, and there's a lot of data out there too that will show you that if you build an individualized connection with the family is going to get more engaged in school and in their child's success in school. And I don't think we or any district nationally really looks at those metrics at the central office and tries to support schools in doing that type of family engagement.
I would have to agree. I think that is crucial, that engagement and the work that you do with your children at home, because many times I've had to step in at home with my own son, and I want that partnership so that I know what to do, so I get them on track.
Thank
And
you.
that's the end goal, to get them. My big end goal is having great citizens of Boston too. So
Audrey, as a teacher, what would you want to see on a performance meter for the Boston Public Schools?
Well, I agree. Family engagement, everything everyone's mentioned is really important. And I definitely would love to see something about teacher feedback on their sense of efficacy within their own buildings, how much they're informed, how much they feel they can lend a voice or have leadership opportunities. But I'm actually going to say, what I would add to that, other than as a teacher, I'd like teachers to be heard, would be that I think that student feedback is also really important. Student feedback is now required as part of each evaluation cycle for educators. But I was reminded yesterday as I was trying to talk to my students about the fact that I would be away from the classroom a few days for the ESSA meetings in DC and trying to go over them about different policies with No Child Left Behind, and and one of my kids was like, Miss Jackson, how come nobody ever asks us about this stuff? And and you know, it's like recently turned 11-year-old child, and he's absolutely right. I think that, you know, you have to take some with a grain of salt, but children really are able to tell you if they feel supported in their learning, and they're able to tell you if they're aware of the ways in which they're growing, both in short intervals and long periods over time. I think that that's really essential too, to sort of empower student voice.
Thank you. Ron, what will you be looking for in a performance meter to know that the district is healthier in 2 years or 3 years than it is today?
Do I only actually get one?
Nope.
Because this is dangerous. You're asking a career evaluator about the performance meter. So I'll say a couple of things. First of all, one, I would ask people to take a look at the performance meter prototype. There are a lot of interesting things there, and beyond that, to look at BPS's school quality framework, because I think it starts to try to get at a measurement regimen for things that are related to school quality and things that go beyond the test score. I mean, at a student performance standpoint, we need to be looking at skill building and social emotional wellness so that we have a whole learning perspective on students. I think one of the critical things that we need to figure out is what are the equity breakdowns in the data going to be. So if we're serious about an equity agenda where you have to do more for some to improve the results for all, you have to be able to break the data down in some ways that let you see the disparities and inequities and respond to them. And so I think we have to get to a granularity around equity in the data where we can respond to it. I think we also have to figure out what are meaningful leading indicators for us to follow, because a good performance meter should allow you to react in something that's closer to real time and not just metrics that maybe shift on an annual or biannual basis. If that's what you're looking at, you can't react enough. But oftentimes, I think we're struggling to find leading indicators that meaningfully link to school quality improvement and performance over time. So we need to bring those things into focus. The last thing I will say is from a ecosystem standpoint, I would love to do for students kind of a total time accounting on learning. So to understand what your learning time looks like in school and beyond school. We know that by the time you're in 6th grade, there's a 6,000 hour differential between what affluent families afford their children and less affluent families afford their children. That's 2+ years of learning and enrichment that in the data we're not accounting very well for. And so there are a set of opportunity and achievement disparities that live in that 6,000 hours. And if we have an idea of how students are spending all of their learning time and where they're spending it, and I think that this is particularly germane to the foundation as a supporter of the youth-serving nonprofit sector, we need to know some things about quality and what students are accessing and what that learning is adding up to. That will help us at a city level and at an institutional level make sure that we're creating the kind of anytime, anywhere quality learning that students deserve.
Right. Liliana, Audrey, I see some head nodding. How do you hear that? Does it connect to your work on the Opportunity Gap Task Force?
Absolutely, absolutely. It is important for us to really think about the in-class and out-of-class time where students are spending a lot of their hours and what exactly they're doing within those hours. It is vital for us to really look at everything that the district is doing. I think the flexibility that Ron mentioned and the opportunity to act right now if something is not working, that is extremely important in a metrics that will be able to close the gap and really create a system that is open and accessible for all.
So I have like 1,000 thoughts. I'll try to give you 3. One I just wanted to mention was in terms of analyzing learning time and programs, I also think it's really important to not only look at learning time for core subjects, but how everything is integrated. So our school has a lot of work, the Manning has a lot of work on social emotional learning, and what I hear a lot from others is that they see social emotional learning time as a distinctly separate thing from academic instruction, and they do not have to be mutually exclusive. I would say 90% of the work we do on social emotional learning is integrated into our academic work. my students, I have a co-teacher, Victor Joyner, and we work together tirelessly to know that our 5th graders know how to talk to each other. They know how to identify what they're confused about, what their question is, and respond to their friend's question. They are also teachers in the room in many ways, and that social emotional development doesn't just help kids who've been affected by trauma, it affects all the kids. They have better teamwork skills, academic skills, and human interpersonal skills. And so to that end, what I kind of was reacting to initially was on the metric, and you don't want it to become a big, long entry of things, but I think it's also important to have factors that the school may think are having a positive influence on their achievement that are not necessarily like easy data points or you have to prove a causation. For example, we do a lot of work in 5th grade around helping facilitate friendships and having kids have, if one family who may not have a car, that other families know that they can offer a ride to participate in an event, and just starting to build those parent networks in ways that people may not have felt comfortable before, because it really does help to enrich all of the children's lives. And that's not something I could be like, hey, put this on our report card, I can prove. But to have a space in the overall report card, or whatever we're calling the metric, where you can note some things that you have a theory about it having a positive impact in order for us to sort of track, is there any correlation or causation, without having to prove it initially, could be really valuable as well.
And in full disclosure, the panelists did have a sneak peek at the content of the slides. So even though we didn't see every slide, they have. And so I'd like to ask you, what didn't you see that you're worried about or that you want the district to be addressing? And if you saw everything you could possibly want to see, then I'll take one piece of advice for the district.
I know I'm talking a lot. I have one. I'll
okay.
go quick and let you guys talk. So I think our school is really tiny. We have a full inclusion model. I know I've said it a bunch. But we do not have any additional funding to fund our model. So there are 2 teachers in our room of 26 children, where you have about 2/3 of the room general ed, resource room, general services you might receive, and about 1/3 of the students, or a little less, who are noted as EI, or emotionally impaired, which is a tricky term, but it generally means that they have emotional regulation or behavioral issues. And so we are a fully functioning at capacity classroom in an inclusion model that I'd be happy to share with anybody. But what comes to mind, I think, as we have a tight budget and are really trying to be responsible in the long run, is to try to take advantage of teachers having multiple certifications, and to have an inclusion approach where you're just putting kids together and saying one teacher will serve them all. And I just want to note, the one thing I think is really important to consider as we move forward is that inclusion has to be done really thoughtfully in order to be worth it. And I think of that as well in terms of an advanced work setting. An advanced work setting is all classrooms should be an inclusive setting. And that you want to make sure that we're not just necessarily expanding rigor, but that you're doing it in a way with teacher and student input that is set up and facilitated to help the students thrive and succeed. So I guess I just want to throw out to all of you in the room the notion that a teacher, I'm a Massachusetts Teacher of the Year and I am triple certified, and if my partner teacher was not in the room, I would not be able to do justice to my students. And so I just really want to make that clear as we move forward with strategic planning.
Great.
I would echo a lot of that and say, well, I love the focus on advanced work. The piece that we don't talk a lot about are our substantially separate classrooms. And we've got, I think we're about 3 times ahead of the state average on children in substantially separate classrooms. And you can go see some amazing substantially separate classrooms. But the fact is, a lot of our kids in substantially separate classrooms shouldn't be there. They should be in an inclusive learning setting, a lot of them. And this district has talked a lot, and again, this would predate Superintendent Chang, but talked a lot about scaling inclusion with very little follow-through. And the reason why is the financial state of the system. And this is why if we don't have that very difficult conversation about empty seats and too many buildings, then we can't do something like scale inclusion. And ultimately, we're hurting our children. I mean, that's just all that's happening through this. And I take Audrey's point to heart. You've got to be so thoughtful about how you scale inclusion. But I would just say this one piece on this that I hope we can talk about as a city is we shouldn't necessarily actually look at it as addressing empty seats in too many buildings. We should look at this as how do we have fully staffed schools that are inclusive. That's where we're trying to get. And that's the opportunity that's presented. And I just dovetail it to this other piece. We have a lot of students who go to school every day in trauma. And how do you get to fully staffed trauma support services and trauma-informed faculty? And we've talked a big game on that as a city, but haven't had the follow-through. Why? Because of the financial structure of the system. A system that is structurally set up not to function financially, where every budget cycle, the mayor steps in, and this predated Mayor Walsh, and says, I'm going to release this amount from reserves to cover the gap, but never actually addresses the structural deficit that we operate with. That's finance talk, but what it equals is no inclusion for our kids and no real trauma support services for our kids, and advanced work that just divides our kids. That's the result. That's what you get when you don't address the financial stability of the system.
Thank you. Liliana?
I'd also like to make sure that we keep in mind that all programs, practices, and policies look at the opportunity and achievement gap and keep that in mind when we are putting anything in place and continue to evaluate our system from that perspective. We've gotten to the point where we have AWC and this is disparity because we haven't been paying enough attention to it. So I think now that we've started to pay attention, the school committee is paying attention, we really need to make sure that all practices, policies, and procedures are viewed from the perspective of equity and opportunity and truly creating, I'm going to quote again, all youth can and must achieve at high levels. That is the mantra of the system, and I think that, we have some of the right people in place to make that happen because they are paying attention to it, and it needs to continue from the mayor's office, keeping everybody accountable at all levels to ensure that we're looking at this.
Thank you. And I'd like to go to Beliza for a last word before I invite Dr. Chang to come back up and take questions from the audience. Beliza?
I think I just wanted to comment on the inclusion model, which my ninth grader went through. And that really has to be done well so that everyone benefits. My son was he was in second grade. He was at another school. The school was very affluent. There were kids who were commenting, why are you in this classroom? So that those sub-separates, if appropriate for your child to be in inclusion, your child should be in inclusion, because that is detrimental to your child, to the way they feel about themselves, to the way they learn. That inclusion setting made a huge difference for my son. The confidence level, the friends he made, just learning. And also for me, it made a huge difference that I was already at the point where I was like, well, could he do this? Yeah, he can do this. That really changed my mindset also. And to comment, AWC, I wanted to stay away from this because this is the huge topic at my school. And my feeling is that it's creating an elitist society in Boston. You have keys, you said the orange juice. I equated to the keys to the knowledge vault and those that don't have the key. And I think it's incredibly unfair. And I think that we need to make it fair for all the children. I don't see any problem and why that curriculum should be brought up for everyone. Why isn't that? Why would anybody have a problem? And you still hear people with a problem with that. And I have to ask, is that because if everyone's special, no one's special? That's what I think of when I think about that. They like the advantage for their kid. But
Well, we're going to pause there so that we can invite all of you into the conversation. I promised you an all-star panel, and I think they really said some provocative things, so thank you. Now, we have left a fair bit of time for questions, and if there are none, we can keep going. But assuming there are questions, my one request to you is there are a lot of people here, so please do two things for me, and I will take it as a personal favor from you to me. Please introduce yourself, and please ask a question. Please do not make a speech. So thank you in advance. We'll start with you, Isa. Wait for the mic. I guess I needed 3 things.
Thank you very much for the entire presentation. It's been mind-blowing. My name is Isa Zimmerman. I am a resident of Boston. I live in Kenmore Square, and I'm an educator, now retired, but still working. And the one element that is sticking is the definition of diversity. Are the only schools in Boston, the Boston public schools, Catholic schools, and charter schools? Aren't there other schools as well that should be part of that mix? It's a question.
Ron, maybe you could take a shot at that one?
Yes, there should be. I mean, we're talking about independent schools of different flavors as well. And I think through a number of formal and informal partnerships, we are more than open to those relationships. And I'll just give you a quick example. I was at Roxbury Latin probably last fall, where their faculty came to me and asked, can we be a part of a table that is about teacher and educator exchange? We feel like we can learn a lot from other educators. We feel like we have something to offer as well. And so we're looking at how to put that partnership together, but I think we have to be thinking ecologically and about where all of our students go. METCO is a program that comes up as something that needs to be included in these partnerships as well, even though those students go to schools and districts outside of the city.
Thank you. Yes. Wait, just wait for the mic, thanks.
My name is Barbara Thornton. The City of Boston is about to embark on a master planning process for the first time in over 25 years, where they're going to envision what the future of the city should look like, the whole city, not just zoning and land use. How are the schools working with that process?
Thank you.
Sure. I will start and the superintendent will add. So as a part of that, there is a 10-year facilities master planning process going on in BPS right now, really doing a thorough audit of building integrity of our building stock and educational adequacy. And so if you think about Boston Public Schools operate a set of buildings where 65% were built before World War II, and our oldest operating building was built in about 1885. And so when we talk about modern education and what modern preparation looks like, we've got to make sure that our students are in modern spaces. But along with that, we've got to define what modern learning and preparation looks like to go along with the spatial concerns. And so as we do this work, we will be thinking about how we reshape the district in some ways, making sure that we invest in retrofit and upgrade, new school build, and possibly consolidation in other configurations that we're thinking about. But we've got to have a modern infrastructure for modern learning. Superintendent?
Thank you. Let me add by saying that you can't build new buildings unless you have a vision for what education should look like in the future. So part of that master plan, part of the master planning process and the facilities audit is a reimagining of what schooling should look like. So this summer, we're going to be launching a lot of public engagement activities to allow parents and students and teachers to give their take on what that should look like. So imagine, we would love to have dual language pathways in every part of the city. We would love high schools that are completely accessible in and out. So the reimagining will be happening. I would say in terms of the idea of bringing more coherence or reconfiguration to bring more coherence to the system, I think it's important for us to know that there are over 20 different grade configurations right now in BPS. So there's K3s, there's K4s, K6s, right? K8s, there are 912s, there are 712s. There's literally 20 different grade configurations. And so kids are moving in and out of schools all the time throughout the career in schools. I think we could do a better job bringing more coherency so the schools can feel more supported.
Tommy, because we didn't have enough time to talk about it, do you want to say anything more about the vision for high school redesign and what high schools might come to look like in a few years?
So let's talk about, maybe I could just talk about one prototype, which is the Madison Park prototype. The hope for Madison Park prototype is that students are doing both their academic work and their career technical work side by side, so the curriculum is actually integrated. They would be spending a few weeks in their academic setting, a few weeks in a career technical setting, and that every single child would have some mentor as they go through high school, a mentor that's connected to the pathway that they so choose. That's our prototype so far for Madison. But it may look differently for, let's say, Excel. It may look differently for Fenway. It really depends. But it's neat to see that there are new pathways developing at other schools other than Madison Park. For example, English High School just received a state grant to launch security / law enforcement pathway. And so students of English now will be able to have the opportunity to look to think about security services as a career. And we all know that if you can computer program coming out of high school, you are going to be living wage immediately.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, Liz Marino, Executive Director of Summer Search Boston. Dr. Chang, it was exciting to see the addition of Amalio Nieves, the Vice Superintendent of Social Emotional Learning. And I'm just curious how you see that fitting into the other priorities and some of the key objectives for his work.
I completely agree with Audrey's comments earlier about this needing to be integrated as part of learning, not separate from the academic work. So blessed to have Amalio Nieves. He comes from Broward County. He led the work here. And Broward in a much larger school district and wanted to come to Boston because of all the excitement. His office currently also is responsible for all the wellness work within the system. So it's social emotional learning and wellness. He is side by side, works side by side at the academic team under Dr. Donnie Tran, special education under Cindy Nelson, Office English Language Learners under Dr. Esparza, and Colin Rose, Dr. Colin Rose, who is responsible for Opportunity Achievement Gap. All 5 of those offices now are in coherence under Dr. Carla Estrada, who is the Deputy Superintendent of Academics and Student Support Services. That's how we can bring coherence. Also, we're not going to, professional development within the system isn't going to be created by central office and pushed out to school. It's all going to be co-developed alongside the Boston Teachers Union through the district capacity project. I saw Paul Trader somewhere out there, but Paul sits on the district's ILT team. There's a district ILT team that will be going through the same sort of learnings that ILT teams at schools are going through. We will be modeling that work, bringing coherence to multiple initiatives.
And ILT?
Instructional Leadership Team.
Thank you. Yes, other questions? Yes.
Cheryl Caminiti from Playworks. And we know that physical activity and play are proven to help enhance learning in students and transform the school environment. We've talked a lot about social emotional learning today. How are you going to make sure that physical activity and play remain important parts of the school day? And this is especially important with our younger students who are still developing.
Yeah. So thank you for the partnership. I'm still learning all the different partnerships. There are a lot of partnerships in Boston, but I've had an opportunity to actually observe Playworks, and so thank you for your efforts. Our elementary school students, based on our district policies, are required to have, I believe, how many hours per week? Two hours? I can't even remember the policy. But we actually have a strict standard for how many hours per week. Does anybody? I apologize. I don't remember the number. I'm going to look to Audrey. Do you have any sense? Do you remember how many elementary school?
I know our kids have about 20 to 30 minutes of recess every day, plus 1 to 2 times a week, a 50-minute period, and then we integrate a lot in the classrooms. So that's approximate. I don't know the actual requirement.
So, but my understanding is, and I haven't really delved deep into it, is that that's not consistent in all schools. And so some schools just don't have access to the space and time. So we're something I need to delve deeper into. Sorry.
Thanks. Yes. Yep. Wait for the mic, please.
My name is Allison Croney. I work at the Elliott School of Fine and Applied Arts. I'm the Associate Director of the School Partnership Program, but I also am in one of the schools, the McCormick Middle School, teaching woodworking 2 days a week. And so my question is really just thinking about specialty classes, specifically classes that are focused on encouraging creativity and design thinking and persistence. And how is that type of hard to track data going to be incorporated into metrics of what kids are learning and what kids are doing throughout the day and at home?
Great. I guess that's for me, right? I'll start there. I love what you said about design thinking. Oh, I love the work around. I use design thinking in much of what I do and and how I lead. So, number one, I would say that the work around design, it should be, and how we espouse creativity really should be integrated into the curriculum. It shouldn't be just a separate class. And when we think about how we assess students, we typically assess on content knowledge, but I think we actually can assess students on their social and emotional growth as well. So as part of the performance meter, we currently in a prototype have a social emotional learning index that we want to use. We could use that metrics to actually measure the growth. But my fear is that it's not seen as, okay, we want to move that data point, so we put kids into that program. I don't think that's actually going to move the data. It needs to be, as curriculum is being created, how explicitly are we going to teach specific skills that develop the student? And that's where I think we're going to really see growth.
And I know the BPS has done tremendous work in partnership with nonprofits, with the arts community, and with philanthropy to expand weekly arts instruction for students, particularly in grades K through 8. And Marinelle Ruminaire is here from EdVestors, who can talk further about the work to expand it to high schools. Creativity isn't only taught in the arts. It can come in a lot of different subjects.
Yes.
So Audrey, I don't know if you have an example you could share about creativity in the classroom, critical thinking skills and problem solving.
Sure. Off the top of my head, this might not be the best, most innovative one, but just recently, so my co-teacher, Victor Joyner, he does mostly of the ELA teaching, and I am lead math teacher, and then we support each other and students while the other is teaching. He's done a lot of work through expeditionary learning, which is an ELA curriculum, and the students were investigating the ways in which components of graphic novels actually are very thoughtful, like the people creating them are very thoughtful about what they're going to draw your attention to, what the different colors are doing, how different types of texts and fonts may influence your interpretation of a theme or a feeling. And so we often in math create different models for things, and then students and working groups create posters or representations of what misconceptions they originally had, and then what they've discovered and sort of like their drawn conclusions about a math concept. And so recently with this, based on the work on graphic novels, they were instructed to create their math posters with that in mind. So they're creating math posters about misconceptions and conclusions and tracking their learning with graphic novel characters and trying to make sure that the size of font, the colors they use, draw the viewer into what the main idea is in the different components. So it's not particularly flashy or innovative with tech, which we do some things with that, but that's a way where you really have to synthesize and think critically in how you're applying lessons from one thing to another.
Great, thank you. Yeah, comment, did you?
Yeah, let me just piggyback on that. I should just say that the type of assessments that are typically used by teachers and administrators now are mainly multiple choice assessments. We usually use multiple choice assessments for accountability purposes. But I do think the opportunity with the Common Core is to take a look at how we might want to look at performance tasks as a way to measure student growth. And performance tasks isn't about finding the right answer and bubbling it in. It's actually complex problems where students need to work with each other, need to do critical thinking, before they actually begin problem solving. And if we can make that as our measure of student growth, I think we'll do a better job at tackling these complex issues, such as how we're measuring student growth in social emotional learning.
Sorry, I also think that that's happening in a lot of schools already, and we're just not capturing what's happening in any data measurement. So great instruction does look like what Dr. Chang was just talking about, and those social emotional skills are completely integrated, where if we both are trying to work on the poster and I don't like the way you wrote it, how are we going to process that? How are we going to come up with a way to resolve conflict, or if we have competing ideas? And I think that those types of projects are happening in many schools, and we just don't have a way to capture it yet.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Yes.
Good morning, Steve Johnson, Rappaport Foundation. First, kudos to the Boston Foundation. What an exceptional morning, and thank you to everybody on the podium. I renewed hope in public education in Boston, and I mean that sincerely. We're very interested in education. We're very interested in mental health. Are we doing an adequate job of diagnosing and referring those in need of mental health services in the Boston Public Schools?
Difficult for me to make a qualitative statement on whether are we doing a good job, yes or no. What I can say is that there are quite robust partnerships with, for example, I see John Reardon, with Children's Hospital and other entities throughout this community of Boston. Partnerships with schools directly and also partnerships with central office. Anytime there may be a crisis within a system, we can immediately respond and make sure that we're taking care of students who may be in trauma. But at the same time, there's a lot of proactive work that needs to be done. And that's the work I think ultimately is going to lead to more healthy, mentally healthy students within the system.
Yep.
So I work in a small school, so I definitely can't speak for the whole district or beyond my school. But I would say that there are many students who have experienced trauma, which I consider mental health in some ways, but also that can translate later on to physical health, negative outcomes from the ACEs study you can look up. But I think that one of the challenges that we're presented with is both a high prevalence of kids affected by trauma and their varied reactions to it, and some of the symptoms are very similar for ADHD and when you've endured trauma. And so what ends up happening is there can be an over-referral for special education for something that may be perceived as a learning disability or a medical diagnosis without actually understanding the root of the behavior or the trauma. One of the things that we've found at our school that really helps to inform an appropriate intervention and supports is having really strong relationships with families where they feel safe enough and trust you to talk about what may have happened in their past, which sometimes the adults are not even involved in. And so those robust and a therapeutic, we call our approach the therapeutic milieu, is really important, where families know that you are not out to find a problem and name it and blame, but to look for the source and whatever intervention or supports are needed to apply them. I don't know, I think that that's a really critical issue.
John, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I don't think we're doing a great job on this, and we need to do better. And I know I'm not supposed to say things like that when you're on a panel and you run a nonprofit and you do stuff like that, but let me be, really clear on this. First, John Reardon does amazing work and did a great report with Boston Children's Hospital that sort of cataloged all the support service models that were out there across the city. And there was some great stuff going on. So it's not that we don't have great stuff going on in some places on support services. We do. The question has been, how do you scale it, and how do you reach it to every school? And there's a difference between some of the great work that goes on centrally around assessments of students, and I see some folks from BPS's department there, they do great things. But let me tell you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the first day of the school at the Trotter. This is why I say we're not doing a good job on this. When somebody gets gunned to death on the corner of our school street 3 hours before school starts, and the body's still on the street, as not, BPS doesn't have anything to do with that, but as our kids walk into school, we get the one counselor that Boston Public Health Commission dispatches to everyone, and we get them for the week. I suspect that the impact of that for our students continues to this day. We are ill-equipped as a school to deal with that. We feel the disconnect with Central on that. And that's the most egregious example. But we have students who have lost parents to gun violence, brothers, sisters, aunts and uncles to gun violence. We have students who deal with all of the chronic health drivers that drive so much of the inequity every day, and that manifests itself through major mental health, social, emotional issues, and we're not equipped as a school to deal with it, and we feel the disconnect with Central, and we are far from the only school who lives with this reality. We have a lot of work to do on this, and just because I don't think I've mentioned this enough, if we don't address the fiscal stability of the system, we will not be able to take the great models that folks like John Reardon have developed and get them to all of the schools.
Ron, I think you would like to jump in and comment on this.
What was that last point, John? Didn't get that one. So a few things. I think this is raising a lot of questions about how we best attack and come up with a set of strategies around whole learner development. We've got to pay attention to the whole person, the whole student in schools. When we were doing the high school redesign work, and we talked to about 500 students over the course of this work, students said this, and this is their phraseology for it. They said, school is not a human experience. What they meant was that everything or many things that they encounter, from the way discipline is implemented to whether you've got a functional bathroom, to how good lunch is, to what the interactions are with adults and students, they do not feel like they can bring their full selves to school. So they've got to check something at the door to sit in the seat and learn. They also can't process the things that are happening to them, and they don't feel supported as human beings. And so we've got to figure out how to do this. One of the things that we're adamant about doing from an ecosystem standpoint is figuring out how do we make the connections between the institutions that do support students. So school is on the hook for a lot. I would posit to you that school is not well equipped to do all of the work that we expect it to do. We've got to use it as a foundation, but there have to be helpmates and partners in doing that whole learner work. A lot of the achievement gap literature says that up to 40% of academic performance is determined by non-academic and poverty-related factors. So school may be able to do some things about it. School definitely realizes the manifestations of some of that, whether it's in trauma or behavior, and we're either better equipped or ill-equipped to deal with it. But we've got to pull on John Reardon. We've got to pull on Mosek Hagopian, who's thinking about, well, what does student homelessness look like? And when you have that kind of instability for a family in school, you're not coming to school ready to learn. So what's the response that we need, building off of the school platform, but not necessarily expecting school to fix homelessness? We've got to bring in some of those resources as well. So it's got to be 360 and ecological, but we've got to ask the question, what does real whole learner support look like, and how do we organize those cross-cutting systems?
Liliana?
One of the areas, while we know that not all schools are doing this, one of the things that we need to consider are some of the programs that are within the school that's doing it. And Betty Bolgi-O'Gara, Betty, can you just wave your hands, is in the audience, and she's the executive director for Key Steps. And Key Steps provides licensed social workers that are actually in the school, and it's a school-based program that helps students to navigate and deal with a lot of these issues around the social, emotional, and trauma issues that they face. So we don't have widespread within the district, but there are some bright spots that are within the districts that can be looked at.
Great, and I'd actually like to get more questions from the audience in a moment, but Tommy, we didn't let you talk about the long-term financial planning, and I think under all of this work of how do we concentrate resources to meet the needs of the children as they arrive, there are financial implications, as John may have hinted at. So could you just say a word or two about the process you're using with the long-term financial planning?
Yes, so a group of really, really smart people are working alongside Erica Giampetro and Eleanor Lawrence to look at particular buckets of work within the system to see how can we get more efficient and use those dollars better, because we often say we're so rich, but we feel so poor. So footprint is one, as John referred to, but transportation also is another. We have 793 buses that transport kids every morning. That's for 7:30 start, a 8:30 start, and a 9:30 start. And then transport all those students back home with 20 different end times. And we spend almost $110 million on busing kids throughout the city to ensure that they get into the highest quality school possible. But if we create higher quality schools in every neighborhood and allow students to stay closer to home, I think we can better repurpose some of those resources. So transportation, footprint, salaries and benefits, all special education, all those are things we just need to take a deeper look at.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Herb?
Superintendent Chang, in January you said that the changes of the student-weighted formula were the last resort for the district as far as fiscal stability goes. Why is the district at this point?
Could you tell us who you are?
Oh, sorry, I'm Maddie Kilgan, and I'm with the Dorchester Reporter.
Thank you.
So our student-weighted formula within the system is the way the system allocates resources based on specific demographic criteria of the students. We made some changes to student-weighted formula this year in order to close the gap between our revenues and our kind of cost of doing business. Specifically, what we did this year was we increased class size in emotionally impaired and autistic and inclusive classes in order to actually, we brought them, the class sizes up to a level that are still lower than state standards. We, in that process, actualized about $5 million of savings in special education with the class size increase, but reinvested those dollars back into special education. We also took a look at our high schools, and we changed weighting in our high schools in order to, so we can actualize $7.5 million. But because of very favorable revenue projections, we're actually going to be able to bring that back right now, and we're going to make sure all the strategic initiatives get actualized once those dollars do come in. That's more of a timing thing than anything else. That was really important. I know that was in the news quite a bit earlier this week. That was really important because our high schools need to start hiring now. We in BPS hire early, and when we hire early, we get more effective teachers that come into our schools, more diverse teachers that come into our school. So it was a very strategic decision that was made.
Great. Herb? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Herb Morse, a resident of the city, and my question is directed to the members of the school committee who are here. And it deals with what seems to me a foundational question that's come out of all the discussion this morning, namely the huge additional investment that has to be made in staff and in staff development and where those funds will come from. So, John, I'm trying to get at the question that you seem to have posed once or twice, namely, what steps are being taken to gather the political will to deal with very obvious structural deficit issues?
We are joined here by members of the school committee. Is there?
Who will be speaking publicly tonight at the school committee?
Who will be speaking publicly tonight at the school committee meeting? So if you like this, watch the school committee meeting tonight. Yes. I think.
So your question is political will, right? Well, I think this room is evidence that there's a lot of people who care deeply. We do need to take a look at we do have a legislative agenda. We work very closely with the mayor's office. Currently, the mayor has put his agenda up publicly. if it's something that doesn't make sense, it's something that we all need to rally behind.
It's all about the how, and I think less about whether or not we need to face really tough realities. It's about how we face them. And I'd say I'm hopeful on this as a parent because of what I've seen Tommy Chang do during his transition. He went out and he listened to everybody in this city, and that informed his excellent 100-day plan because he went out and listened. If how we confront this is just devised internally inside of BPS and then rolled out to the public, it will fail, and it will be a bad plan because they'll miss pieces. But if we use Tommy Chang's model for his transition and actually go out and really listen to the community and really listen to the parents and listen to the students about what they want, and then devise that plan and bring it back and then revise, look, it's going to be bruising. It's not going to be easy, but it can be successful and it can be the right thing. And that's where I'm hopeful because I've seen how Tommy Chang listens. And he's just a remarkable listener, and then he acts. And I don't think BPS functioned that way prior to Tommy Chang.
By popular demand, Michael O'Neill.
So I was trying to be respectful to the Boston Foundation because I was not invited to be a panelist. But Paul turned and said, if you want to speak, feel free to speak, so I will. You have to realize BPS has 4 sources of revenue: federal funds, state funds, city funds, and private foundations, many of whom our partnerships are represented in the room today. And so we're being affected by all of those. The federal funds have been very severely under attack. In fact, we were able to avert a refunding formula in the latest bill that passed in Congress that Audrey is going to be part of the Interpretations Rules Committee, and that's great that she is going to be. But we were able to avert a relook at how federal funds were going to be distributed, particularly Title I, Title II, and Title III. And it will hurt us in the long term, but in the short term, we're going to be okay, and that's due to the congressional delegation on that. So on the state funds come to us a number of ways, and particularly the Chapter 70 funding, and the state had a commission last year that looked at the foundation budget and how that is calculated. And the recommendations that came out of that would basically be neutral to Boston. So some people are saying we should be advocating to fully fund the foundation budget, but there will not be an impact to Boston on that. But overall, the charter reimbursement has really hurt Boston in particular. So I'm not saying pro or con with regards to charter, particularly in light of our host's viewpoint on that today. But I did testify up at the DESE hearing on the proposal to increase 2 charter high schools in Boston. And I asked the DESE board to look at the financial impact to districts. So they're going to increase 1,100 seats in Boston for 2 new high schools. And when those are up and running, that's going to impact BPS $17.5 million. So if we have to spread that pain, that's $500,000 per our high schools, or it's $140,000 if we spread it to all of our schools. And that impact, that may increase seats for 1,100 students, but it will dramatically impact 57,000 students that we have in our district right now. So I asked DESE, did they feel a responsibility to look at the impact to districts when they make the decision about charter seats?
Right.
And the DESE board, by a vote of 8 to 2, excuse me for 1 second, Elizabeth, said it's not within our purview. We don't look at that. So we're working, the state funds have remained relatively flat to Boston, but it's gone from 31% of our budget to 14% of our budget. And so the city has had to make up that difference. And the city has continuously, the past number of years, under Mayor Menino and under Mayor Walsh, has continued to do that and help us. But the city is reaching their limit as well. And so many people have commented that, you know, it's only a 13.5 increase allocation this year compared to previous years. But we don't have a collective bargaining agreement with our teachers union for next year. We're in the middle of discussions with them about that. And it's the city's obligation to pick up that increase when it happens. So when we have a collective bargaining agreement with our Boston Teachers Union, you will see the total allocation of the city will be on par with the past few years. But it's something we're working through. And so you asked the school committee's viewpoint on it. We're advocating at the state level. We're advocating at the federal level. We are pushing hard with the city. and we're working on the privates as well.
Next time, we'll put you on the panel. Clearly, never a dull moment. John, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and then I would like to have the last word be Tommy's for anything we didn't cover today. So, John?
Thank you. And I just, part of you lose office, and then you can say whatever you want, and you don't have to wear a tie, and things are great. So I have deep respect for Michael O'Neill. He and I worked very closely together during my 6 years on the city council, and he does great work. I do entirely disagree with what he just said. And I'm not a yes man for charter schools. I choose to put my kids in the Boston Public Schools. I'm deeply concerned with what charter schools are doing around suspensions and how we get charter schools to serve all students. But that said, that's the red herring. 6 years we did school budgets where we held the Boston Public Schools harmless from the charter school reimbursement. And the Boston Public Schools did nothing to adjust to the changes in enrollment. Nothing. They just kept running their structural deficit. And when you have somewhere in the order of 20 to 30,000 empty seats and 120 buildings, you can't point the finger at charter schools. Point the finger at them on the suspension rate. Ask them to do better on SPED. Tell them to do their fair share on ELL, but don't say they're taking our money when we're running a Titanic, the SS Titanic, as our fiscal thing. Don't say that you're robbing Peter to pay Paul when Peter's living in a 10-room house with 4 kids and he's busted through all his credit cards, okay? Because that's what BPS has done until now. And I have an issue with it because it feeds this toxic debate that has parents going after each other in this city. And I'm tired of it because there are some good reasons some parents want to put their kids in charters, and there are some good reasons why parents want to put their kids in BPS, and these parents need to be working together, not fighting each other and blaming each other, and BPS has to own their fiscal health. That's how I see it. And I want to reiterate, I've seen Mike O'Neill do great things for kids as chair of the school committee, and I've got great confidence in him. He and I have a sharp disagreement on that, though, and you give me a microphone, I get them with limited time these days, and I'm just going to take it.
Right.
So.
Tommy, last word?
I can't let John have the last word. So, I will say I caution all of us to polarize this conversation in this city because it's been polarized in other parts of the country, and it is not helpful for all kids. So I would just say thank you to the Boston Foundation for putting together this effort. It's great to see so many people. I often joke that everybody has an opinion in Boston. That's because everybody just deeply cares so much, and that's so evident here today. We are committed over the next several months to long-term strategic implementation planning, and at the end of it, we will be sharing what that plan will be, and we will work in collaboration with teachers and administrators and parents and students in that strategic implementation plan. But at the end of it all, a plan cannot be a collection of 1,000 initiatives. We're never going to move the work ahead in that way. So we will need to get very laser focused, and we need to figure out where the most powerful levers will be. So when that plan gets released, or even in the process, there'll be many ways for folks to be engaged. Please provide feedback. And at the end of it all, let's all move forward together as a culture of we. Thank you.
Thank you to our panel and to Tommy. And thank you all for being here. There's more to discuss and more to do, and we look forward to doing that with you. Thank you.